would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally. No, I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street.
I love the shoulder adjustment when she knows she's about to say a good line. But that was, of course, Vice President Harris shutting down some hecklers on Thursday by ridiculing Trump for one of the things he is most sensitive about, his crowd sizes. She's been tweaking him a lot lately, and it seems to be working. I mean, just listen to how Trump melted down over recent accusations that he's been ducking interviews and slowing down.
I've gone 48 days now without arrest, and I've got that loser who doesn't have the energy of a rabbit. Tell me when you've seen me take even a little bit of a risk. Not only am I'm not even tired.
Rabbits. Okay, Donald, but it's not only the candidate who's getting under Trump's skin. It's also Harris's campaign spokesperson, Ian Sams. Through his many Fox News appearances, you can see him on the screen there. Trump whined repeatedly this week that Fox is giving Sams too much airtime, claiming that he, quote, and this is a Trump quote, virtually owns the network, Ian Sams, that is. And he also mentioned Sams by name during his appearance on Fox and Friends late this week. That's called getting in someone's head. Joining me now is Ian Sams. He's a senior advisor for the Harris-Walz campaign, known him a long time. Okay, Ian, let me start with this. There's a lot to talk about, but this is kind of a badge of honor. I mean, Trump attacking you by name tells me he thinks people are listening to you. So why do you think you're getting under his skin so much?
Well, I'm just a spokesperson, and I try to spend every single day advocating for why my candidate has the right vision for the country and her plans for people, and why Donald Trump doesn't. I don't really know why Donald Trump seems to be spending his time TiVoing Fox News appearances and lashing out against spokespeople. That's not something that the vice president does. I think she thinks more about the country and what she wants to do as president than who's on cable news talking about her. And I think that this is something that people remember from when Donald Trump was president, which is instead of actually taking on the mantle of leadership and doing things on behalf of the American people, he sits in the dining room throwing ketchup at the wall, watching Fox News. And I think that that's something that people should think about when we have this final few weeks to the election. Is that what we want to go back to? Do we want to have a guy who's trigger happy with his thumbs on Truth Social sitting there every day, someone who's, as you just showed in that clip, increasingly diminished and on the decline, where it would be even worse than it was in his first term? And I think that these things have consequences for people. I mean, is this the kind of guy who you want in charge of the nuclear codes? Is this the kind of guy who you actually think is going to spend any time thinking about you as a voter and you as a person and your life and what would make your life easier and better? No, he's someone who's literally TiVoing, watching pundits talk and rage truthing about it. And so I think, you know, this is a part of the core contrast between the two leadership styles that you see between these two candidates.
Well, I know you're not going to say it, but I'll say it. It's because he thinks you're effective at your job. And I'm sure your friends from college are loving and enjoying this whole moment. That aside, let's talk about the campaign. So the campaign released a statement last night. We've been talking a bit so far in this show about this vivid story Trump told about Arnold Palmer in the shower. I'm not going to ask you more details about that. I do have lots of questions. But you released a funny statement. Why? Because in other times, we would have maybe brushed by it and ignored it. But what do you think that story tells us? And why was it important to release a statement about his weird, creepy story?
He's increasingly unstable and unhinged. I mean, you hear the vice president talk about that, and you hear her talk about the fact that this is someone who will ramble on and on and on and make absolutely no sense. And it raises real questions about his mental fitness for the office. And at a time where he won't release his medical records, at a time where he won't sit with real interviewers like 60 Minutes and answer questions in front of the country, where he won't debate her again. I mean, it really does raise questions about his mental capacity and ability to do the job when he goes on these long rambles that, you know, his team tries to get to the press, and they told CNN, you know, this is his big speech in Pennsylvania is going to be part of his closing argument in the campaign. and it's about a dead golfer's anatomy. I mean, it's like really weird stuff that's happening every day by Donald Trump on the trail. I think part of why we talk about it and why you hear the vice president talk about it is I think so much of our mass media and so much of the country are numb to the last decade of Donald Trump, and they aren't watching his rallies as much as they used to. And I think that people need to see and hear what he's actually saying to understand what an unstable person this is, and that if you go to the polls in 2 weeks, that's what you're voting for if you vote for him.
No question. I agree. People need to see it. That's why we play it and try to talk about it, too. Okay, quickly before I let you go, tomorrow's a huge day on the campaign trail. Full day with Liz Cheney. The vice president is spending. Never thought I would speak those words, but here we are in 2024. What are you hoping as a campaign? Like, who's the main audience for these events? And why is it so important to spend the day doing this just over 2 weeks from the election?
Well, I think the vice president said this a lot. She wants to be a president for all Americans, not just people on the left, not people on the right, not just people in the middle, but everybody. And I think that when you have people who are rock-ribbed conservatives like Liz Cheney, who are standing up and saying, Donald Trump poses a real threat to everything we care about as a country. He poses a threat to your life, whether it's on national security or the economy or your freedoms. That's something that people should take very seriously. And so when we go out on the campaign trail and the vice president's going to Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin tomorrow to suburban areas where there are a lot of people who are still maybe trying to make up their mind. They're trying to make up their mind between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. And maybe they've been hearing all this noise that we're talking about on Fox News and elsewhere about her being some scary liberal. Well, when they see her and they hear her and they hear her talk about her commitment to be a president for everybody, when she goes on Fox News and tells Fox News viewers who are so often fed a bunch of crap about her what the truth is, which is that she actually cares about being a president for all Americans, and she's going to wake up every day, even if you didn't vote for her, trying to make your life better. When you go out to these battleground states and you talk to voters directly with a rock-ribbed conservative like Liz Cheney, it helps illustrate that point. And it shows people that she's not the caricature that Donald Trump tries to paint her out to be, because she isn't. And so she's going to keep talking about the fact that she's going to be a president for all Americans. It's why you've seen hundreds of Republicans come out and endorse her candidacy, former Senator Flake, John McCain's son, former Vice President Dick Cheney. I mean, Jen, 20 years ago, would you have thought that a Democrat would be earning the support of Vice President Dick Cheney? I think it shows the stakes of this election for the country and for people's freedoms and for the Constitution, and she's going to be talking about that tomorrow.
Ian Sams will be watching all of it. We'll be talking about it tomorrow night. We'll be taking a lot of it. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you have a busy life and schedule these days.